so glad you're hanging out with us today. If you are on live with us at our Sunday 9 a.m. gathering, let me talk a little bit about how the church online platform works. We have a live host with you right now. They're here to chat and guide discussion. They're also available to pray with you. So if at any time today you want prayer, just click on the prayer button at the bottom of the screen and it'll take you to a private chat. Now, if you're watching later on it this week or maybe another week, we'd still love to partner with you in prayer. Simply email us at prayer@cornerstonenj.org and a staff member will get back to you. On the right side of your screen, you'll see our chat thread. If you're on your phone, you'll find it at the bottom. You're welcome to join it, discuss anything, and say hello to all of us. And we'd love to talk to you. Today is the second week of our Lent series, The Unexpected King, and Pastor Fred Provencher will be speaking. Before he starts, let's take a moment to reflect and prepare our hearts for what God may have in store for us today.
Like the King, clothed in suffering to save me, Through your pain and scars, the world was on your heart completely. I stand in awe, in wonder. I bow before
This year, we can't wait until Easter to take our Easter offering. We have to begin taking our Easter offering early because of the immediate need in the Ukraine. We will start collecting our Easter offering right away due to the nature of this need. As you know, the war in Ukraine has displaced millions of Ukrainian refugees in Poland, and there's an overwhelming need for medical supplies and the care for those who are wounded. Cornerstone has this incredible opportunity. We are partnering with an international medical supply company and with a shipping company to send supplies, medical supplies, directly into Poland. They will be housed in a warehouse that is owned by an organization called Convoy of Hope, a good, solid Christian organization located right in Poland. From there, these supplies will be used to treat wounded refugees, and they know how to transport to those who are doing medical care in the Ukraine. As you know, every year at Cornerstone, we take a special Easter offering. And this year, we want our offering to go to help these refugees and those who are suffering because of the war in Ukraine. Now, because of the immediacy of the situation, we've already started collecting donations. In fact, word has gotten out, and we already have over $50,000 set to be spent on medical supplies. And we are already in the act of shipping them over to Poland. But we're going to send multiple collections over there. Every time we get enough, we're going to fill up another container and we're going to send it over there. So I believe that even though we already have 50,000, we can get to 100,000 if all of us do what we can. If you can help us out, we want you to go to pushpay.com/cornerstonenj and hit the button that says Ukraine Relief. And that way we can start dispersing our Easter offering right away. I want to remind you that this is a love offering. This is an offering that we do out of love for others on top of our regular giving. We don't just take our regular giving and say, well, I'm going to do this now. We do this because we say, God, you filled our hearts with love, and on top of our ordinary giving, we want to give on top of that. So we invite you to celebrate Easter early by giving to our special Easter offering dedicated to helping those in the Ukraine. The last week of Jesus' life was filled with conflict and controversy and accusations and intrigue. And that's what we've been studying as we make our way toward Easter. We've been looking at scenes from the last week of Jesus' life. If you remember, it began when Jesus entered Jerusalem very publicly, riding on a donkey, in effect, proclaiming himself the Messiah that Israel had been waiting for. But it was clear then that the religious authorities were not on board, and they were very threatened by Jesus' entrance. And so all of this, of course, explodes in Jesus' arrest and crucifixion on Friday. But between Sunday and Friday, it's just a week of controversy. It's all very public. There's a lot of teaching, and all the conflict between Jesus and the religious leaders is housed in what seems to be theological discussions. But what it really is the religious leaders know that the crowd is watching Jesus, and they can't arrest him while the crowd is around him and adoring him. So what they're trying to do is discredit him. The last verse of Luke chapter 19 says this: "Every day he was teaching in the temple, but the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the leaders among the people were trying to kill him. Yet they could not find a way to do it because the people hung on his words." Imagine that setting. Every day, Jesus is teaching in the temple. The temple is the most important building in all of Jerusalem. And Jesus is there, and he's surrounded by crowds of people who are hanging on his words. Meanwhile, the religious authorities, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the leaders, the most important cultural gatekeepers in all of Israel, are wanting to arrest Jesus, hand him over to the Romans, and get him killed. They want him out. So that's the setting. That's the tension that's going on. So they ask him questions, and Jesus asks them questions, and they argue back and forth. Each one of the discussions could be a sermon in and of themselves. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at 3 different discussions. And rather than get caught up in all the things that are discussed in each one of them, I want to try to gain a picture of the overall message that Jesus is sending to them and through them sending to us. Why has he come? What's he inviting us to? What are the consequences of rejecting him? That's what's going on. So it begins when Jesus tells a parable in Luke chapter 20, starting in verse 9. Jesus is going to tell a parable to the people. And what he's really trying to do is he's trying to show the religious authorities the consequences and really holding up to the light what they are doing by rejecting him as one who has been sent by God. So here's the parable. It says this. He went on to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard, rented it to some farmers, and went away on a long journey. Verse 10. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they could give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him, sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but that one they beat and treated shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. He sent a third, and they wounded him and threw him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, well, what should I do? I will send my son, whom I love. Perhaps they will respect him. But when the tenants saw him, they talked the matter over. This is the heir, they said. Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, God forbid. And Jesus looked directly at them and he said, then what is the meaning of that which is written? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. Now listen to this in verse 19. The teachers of the law and the chief priests looked for a way to arrest him immediately because they knew that he had spoken this parable against him, but they were afraid of the people. So there's a huge reaction from the crowd. They shout out, God forbid, when Jesus gets to the end of his story. And the religious leaders know that Jesus has told this parable against them. And it only hardens them in their belief that they have to get Jesus out. They have to eliminate him. So you can understand the strength of the reaction if you kind of retell the parable in modern phrasing. So imagine that you have a mature man who has done pretty well financially, and he wants to invest in several local franchises with his son to kind of teach his son how to run the businesses. So the owner purchases several franchises of Dunkin' Donuts in North Jersey, he and his son together, and he's going to walk them through this. So he's overseeing these things, and so it's time to kind of send one of their employees to a local Dunkin' Donuts franchise and get a report. Have they put all of the cash accounted for and put it in the safe? Have they kept all the books? Did they get all the right inventory? Did they do all the right things? So he sends somebody there. And when he gets there, they refuse to talk to him. They refuse to tell him anything about the cash deals that went on. They refuse to tell him anything about the inventory. There are a lot of questions. There's money missing. There's inventory missing. And they just refuse to talk to him. So the owner sends somebody else, somebody higher in the food chain. And they send him, and him they actually physically accost. They beat him up and they put him in the hospital. Now this is intolerable. So the father says to the son, I'm going to send you. You're the owner. This is our business. You're going to go down there and you're going to tell them that this is over, that you're cleaning house. But when he goes to the Dunkin' Donuts, the people who are running the Dunkin' Donuts, the manager and the employees say, this guy is the son of the owner. If we kill him, then we'll get to keep the Dunkin' Donuts. And that's what they do. They kill him. That's why when Jesus says, what will the owner do to those people when he finds out? You realize that's why they're reacting so strongly. Because if you kill the owner of the Dunkin' Donuts, you don't inherit the Dunkin' Donuts, you inherit a prison sentence. When you do that, you go to prison, right? You have to deal with these people, right? It's crazy. Nothing is more insane than acting like you own the Dunkin' Donuts when you're just employees and it's owned by somebody else. So Jesus is telling them this story because he's saying, guys, the kingdom belongs to God. It's not your kingdom, it's God's kingdom, and you are stewards of it. This is why the crowd cried out so loudly. Because in Jesus' day, the vineyard was a stock phrase for Israel. Whenever anybody said, a man planted a vineyard, they know they're telling a story about the nation of Israel. So Jesus is saying God created the nation of Israel and he put you guys in charge of leading it. You have been called into fellowship with the God, the Creator. You are gatekeepers of his kingdom. And so he wants to know how you're doing it being his people. That's what he means by saying he went to get some fruit from the vineyard. Well, what is God looking for from his people? He's looking for them to be faithful. He's looking for them to share his message with other people. He wants everybody in the world to be able to see Israel and through Israel to see him. But it only works if they act like they're part of God's kingdom. So what Jesus is saying is occasionally God has sent them messengers, meaning the prophets, to tell them you are not doing things right. And every time, rather than listen to the prophets, they kill the prophets or they disregard the prophets. And now Jesus is saying God has sent his son. And I'm here to remind you, you are not the owners, you are stewards. Now, the good news of this is you are stewards of God's kingdom. You've been invited to participate in something much larger than yourselves. This is Jesus is saying, we are going to open up the doors to this kingdom and we are going to invite in non-Jewish people. And we're going to send the message of grace and freedom and peace and forgiveness to all those all over the earth. And you're going to be in the middle of it. But they don't want to be a part of God's kingdom. They've kind of deluded themselves into thinking that this is their kingdom and that they're the ones in charge and that they will let Jesus be a part of it if they deem it necessary. And they have deemed Jesus unnecessary to their plans and they're acting like they own the kingdom. Jesus is saying, this is insanity. You are stewards of God's kingdom. You don't own the kingdom. And so, he's saying this is self-destructive. That's what he means when he quotes Psalm 118. And he says, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Jesus is saying, you can reject me, but God is building his kingdom on me. And you can throw yourself against this stone, but you will be the ones who will be broken, not me. If you were to look from the outside, you would think that all of these powerful people are lined up against Jesus, and Jesus is just really vulnerable right now. But Jesus says, that's not what's happening. God has sent me. You can oppose me. You can throw yourself against me, but you're the ones who will be shattered, not me. This is not going to affect me. He is going to the cross to atone for the sins of the people so that God can throw open the gates of the kingdom to all the world, and he's inviting them to be a part of it. But right now, by rejecting him, they've lost track of who they are. They're acting like owners when they're really stewards. Now, I can imagine people saying, well, I'm not sure I want to be a part of Jesus' kingdom. I think I'd rather have my own kingdom. I want to be an owner. I don't want to be a steward, right? So I can understand that. I know it feels like if you're the owner, you have more freedom. And if you're just a steward in Jesus' kingdom, you don't have any freedom. But actually the opposite is true. We're going to look at the next controversy, which is about politics and taxes. And it'll show you the problem with thinking that you are the owner. Look what it says. Verse 20. So keeping a close watch on him. Remember, after the last scene, they realized Jesus is telling this against us. We need to get rid of him. So they can't do it because the crowd loves Jesus. So he says in verse 20, keeping a close watch on him, he sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies questioned him. They said, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Now, all of that stuff in verse 21 is just blowing smoke. It's just flattery. We know that you're a teacher. We know you do what always is right. Here's where the penny drops in verse 22. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? They figure they have Jesus in an inescapable bond. If Jesus says, no, we shouldn't pay taxes, then they can just go to Pilate and say, Jesus is telling the people not to pay taxes, so arrest him. And then he's Pilate's problem. If he says, yes, we definitely should be paying taxes, then the crowd might turn against Jesus, and then they can move in and hand him over to Pilate. So they figure either way, there's no way Jesus can get out of this. So in verse 23, it says this, he saw through their duplicity, though, and said to them, show me a denarius, whose image and inscription are on it. A denarius is a Roman coin. And by the way, Tiberius Caesar's inscription was on it. And they say, Caesar's, they reply. And he said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. They were unable to trap him in what he had said, and there in public, and they were astonished by his answer, and they became silent. So Jesus says, show me a denarius, and Tiberius Caesar's image is on it, and he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar, and give to God what is God's. Now, this is an intriguing little statement, and there's a lot that you could say about what it means for living in a secular community like we do with a secular government. Jesus seems to be saying that there's a place for the power of the government and that we can give allegiance to the government without turning our backs on God as long as we live for God first. So all of these things are kind of going on. There's a lot of interesting things you could say about what Jesus said. You could have a very fruitful discussion about the place of taxes and the place of the Christian. And, bringing it into our world, we have a lot more reason to talk about taxes than Jesus's people had. In their day, they were an occupied people. Remember, Rome owns everything. So it had been Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, Tiberius Caesar. Rome is ruling everything. The Jews are an occupied people. They have to pay taxes. So, they can say, should we pay taxes or not? But what they're really saying is, should we overthrow the government or not? Because they didn't really have any choice. But we live in a representative democracy. Tax policy is an important thing in our world. We've been asked to be a part of the government. So we should debate taxes. We should talk about, where are taxes being spent? What are the priorities of the government? What do we think our government should be doing? What do we think they shouldn't be doing? What do we want our tax dollars to go to? There's all sorts of fruitful things we can discuss about tax policy. And we have a lot more reason to talk about it than they did because we live in a representative democracy. But that misses the point. These people did not care about taxes. They did not care about politics. They cared about making Jesus look foolish because they thought they were the owners of the vineyard. And so all they want to do is get rid of Jesus. So here's the problem. When you act like this is your world and you're in charge, you have to hold on to power. And when you want to hold on to power, you don't care about truth anymore. You don't care about having discussions about the right way to govern and the right way to spend the public trust. You only care about holding on to power. If this is God's kingdom and we are stewards, then we say, hey, what has God called us to do? How can we solve the problems for the greatest number of people? How can we be responsible to God for what he has called us to do? It's his kingdom, so we want to be faithful. But if it's my kingdom, then I can just make up the rules as I go along. And the most important thing is holding on to power. And that's what they're doing. They don't care about politics. They care about winning. Politics is a tool to make their enemies look foolish. And let's face it, this is the world that we live in now. it seems like a very, very small percentage of our public officials actually care about governing well. They don't care about governing well. At least it doesn't seem like they do. All they care about is making their opponents look foolish and making themselves look good. So, the policies, the taxes, those kind of things are incidental. What's important is making it look like you get the credit and other people look bad. And that's the world that we live in, because people live as if this kingdom belongs to them. Contrast this with what we're trying to do through our Easter offering in Ukraine. Because we believe this is God's kingdom and we are stewards of what he's given to us, we can say, how can we give what God has given to us to help people who are suffering in Ukraine? And you know what? It doesn't matter who gets the credit. It doesn't matter whose brand is on it. It doesn't matter whose name and who contributes. Together, we're going to make something happen that will help people over there. And you know what? You can do a lot of good when you don't care who gets the credit, because it's really about meeting the needs. But that freedom comes from saying, God's the one who gets the credit. When these people get these medical supplies, all we want them to know is that God hasn't forgotten them and gotten their needs. That's the freedom that comes from being in God's kingdom. But these Pharisees, they had forgotten. The Pharisees are not atheists. They were deeply religious people. They had just forgotten that this is God's kingdom, and they were acting like it was their kingdom. Now, there were other people who were there, and in the next controversy, there's another group of people called the Sadducees, and you can see by their question that their motivation for challenging Jesus is slightly different, but also reflective of what's happening in our world today. Look what it says in verse 27. Some of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus with a question, and they said, "Teacher," they said, "Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother." Now, a couple of explanatory things. The Sadducees were mostly priests, mostly people in charge of the temple. They were culturally powerful. They were pretty wealthy. So they had it pretty good. They didn't gain anything by overthrowing Rome. They were in positions of real power and privilege. And also, they didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in the afterlife. They just believed in now. And so they're asking Jesus a question about levirate marriage. Levirate marriage is an old custom that nobody had done in Jesus' day, way from the Old Testament. And it said, if there are two brothers and one brother gets married, but before he can have any children, he dies, the second brother should marry the widow, and when she gets pregnant with a child, that child is the first brother's heir. That way, everybody inherits land according to their family and things don't get lost. The thought is we want this widow to have children and to have something to inherit. And that'll only happen if she has sons. So it's a really old law that, again, really nobody took literally anymore. So they use it to paint this picture. They say, now in verse 29, there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died childless. The second, and then the third married her. And in the same way, the 7 died, leaving no children. So 7 brothers, they all died. They don't leave any children. Here's the question. Finally, the woman died. Now, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since the 7 were married to her? Obviously, they're trying to make the idea of the afterlife sound ridiculous. Here's a man with a woman with 7 husbands. Who gets to be her husband in the afterlife, right? But Jesus replies with wisdom that can only come from knowing something about the afterlife that we don't grasp. He takes their question seriously, even though it was just meant to make him look bad. And he says in verse 34, the people of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection of the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. And they can no longer die, for they will be like the angels. They are God's children, and since they are children of the resurrection. But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise. For he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Some of the teachers of the law responded, "Well said, teacher." Jesus' answer was so good that some of the people who believe in the afterlife said, "Wow, that was a really good answer." Jesus says, you don't understand the way the afterlife works. People will live forever. And so you don't need to make children. Therefore, there won't be any marriage. And we will all have the things that we get from marriage. We'll all have transparent relationships. We'll have open fellowship. We'll have community. And so the things that a home brings will be available to everybody, because the resurrection of the righteous will bring us into a whole new kingdom. And Jesus is saying, you don't understand that. But then he brings them back to a verse that they would have found authoritative in Moses that says, God is the God of the living and not the God of the dead. When I look at this, I think about modern atheists in our world. The Sadducees are not really atheists. It's more complicated than that. But I think about atheists in our world. If you really don't think there's any life beyond this life, if you really think that there's no time when you're going to stand before God, then all that there is that's left in the world is power. If there's no God, then all that's left is power. You can say, well, I want to do good and I want to do right things and I want us all to get along. Yeah, but there's really no accountability for that. All there is can you get your way for the time period that you're alive, and keep people from getting in your way. And so it's just a free-for-all. And that's also what you see in this world. If there is no God and no accountability, then why not just invade another country and take it over, right? If there is no God, then just make up the rules as you go along. But Jesus is saying, guys, you're missing it. There is another life, and there is a kingdom. And I'm inviting you to be a part of the kingdom now. We'll find out after Jesus' death and resurrection that the way we are made worthy of the kingdom is by receiving the forgiveness that Jesus offers. He offers us forgiveness. He paid the penalty for our sin with his death on the cross. And he invites us to be part of his kingdom. And as his forgiven followers, we get to be his hands and feet, living as stewards in his kingdom even while we live in this world. And when this life is over, we have no fear. We go to be in the presence of God immediately and wait until God remakes heaven and earth. And so Jesus says, that's the reason why you live differently. It's because there is a God. And Jesus is saying that's a good thing. But if you were going to live as if this is your kingdom, then you're going to live selfishly and you're going to live for the here and now, and you won't have any freedom to do anything that's truly good. And so I want you to see in this that Jesus is calling the people and he's saying, rejecting me is a disastrous decision because I'm inviting you to be a part of a much larger kingdom. I'm inviting you to be a part of what I want to do to change the world, but it only works if you remember that it's my kingdom and one day you will face me. There's great freedom in knowing that it's God's kingdom, because then we can say, what has God given me? He's given me some money, he's given me some talent, he's given me some time. How can I use this for him? And as long as I'm doing what he wants me to do, then I'm okay. He's going to take care of the rest. And I get to be a part of watching what he does. I invite you to be a part of a larger kingdom. You can do that by receiving God's gift of forgiveness now. That's what Jesus' death is all about. He's inviting you to receive forgiveness through Jesus. And that will gain you entrance into his kingdom, which you can live in now and will continue on after death. That's what Jesus is inviting people to doing. And that's why he's saying, rejecting me is the wrong thing to do. Let's pray. Father, for those who are seeking something more from this life, I pray that you would open up their hearts to respond to you, and that you would invite them into your kingdom. And Father, for those of us who live in your kingdom, help us to be good stewards and help us to do some things that are truly good, because it's your world and your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. I've got some announcements for you about some things happening at Cornerstone in the coming weeks. First, I want to talk about Easter. As you know, Easter is right around the corner, and we are so excited to celebrate it with you. If you're attending online, meet us here at 9 a.m. However you join us for Easter, we can't wait to see you there. Next up, we've got a few things on the way for families watching. We have a child dedication coming up on Sunday, March 27th. And if you want to be a part of that, or you want any more information, you want to contact me at jhine@cornerstonenj.org, and I would love to help you out in any way. We also have an Understanding Communion class coming up for kids 2nd grade and up. Parents and children attend this class together so that they can make a family decision about when to take communion. We really just allow parents to make the decision whenever they think that their family's ready. And that class is happening on Monday, March 28th at 7 p.m. in the barn. To get information about events like these and more, check us out on Facebook and Instagram, or you can sign up for a weekly email by going to our website and clicking on the subscribe button at the top right hand of the page. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and have a great rest of the day.